don't know what I'm doing!
Aimed in for Kurtza!
If you've turned on TV, or been on the internet, or even left your house in the past few weeks, you've probably noticed the international celebration of the beautiful game and millions of dollars in corrupt ad revenue known as the FIFA World Cup. Now, this World Cup has been no exception to the usual tradition of unexpected events. Lead stars like Lionel Messi and Ronaldo have left early, the defending champions Germany failed to advance out of the knockout round, and perhaps most surprisingly of all, World Cup mainstays such as the United States and Italy failed to even qualify. Now again, this isn't shocking. New teams from the World Cup come and go as years go on. As a matter of fact, there was one time where a team that you probably wouldn't expect to make the World Cup actually showed up. And not only that, they played a fairly impressive game. Hi, I'm Jeremy, I don't know what I'm doing, and welcome to the curious case of how Canada actually made it to the World Cup. Now, a good place to start would probably be the game that led them to the World Cup, that being the 1985 CONCACAF Championship. Here's how FIFA works if you don't know. There's several districts around the world. Europe is UEFA, North America is CONCACAF, etc. And all these different districts function monitoring their own international teams, ranking them, and eventually that's how teams qualify to be sent to the World Cup. I absolutely have no idea what I just said. I read that off of an online article. I don't know how soccer works.
This guy is stupid!
Basically, in the 1985 CONCACAF Championship, the tournament whittled down to a situation in which whoever won the tournament qualified for the World Cup in Mexico the next year. As it would turn out, Canada would end up in a final match against Honduras in St. John's, Newfoundland in Canada. In the final game, Canada managed a decisive but slim 2-1 victory. This meant for the first time ever, Canada was going to the World Cup.
And there it goes! The final whistle! Canada has qualified for World Cup 86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
A great team effort by Canada, and they didn't sneak in on the back door. They beat the defending champions of CONCACAF 2-1 here in St. John's.
Now, 1986 was already a fairly big year for Canada. The city of Vancouver was hosting a relatively successful World's Fair, and as I previously mentioned, they were going to the World Cup. Following their qualification, Canada found themselves in Group C, with other teams such as France, the Soviet Union, and Hungary. Probably the biggest threat was France. They were heavily favored to win the World Cup that year, and that turned out to be a fairly good estimate, as they ended up finishing up third in 1986.
I can remember vividly the bus ride to the first game against France. And the Mexicans love to do this thing where they line up along the streets, you've got your police escort to the stadium, and they do this thing where they put their hands up and they indicate what the score is going to be. Normally it's like this, but in this case, they had to use both hands for France. Like it was this is Canada 0.
And unfortunately for Canada, that was their first matchup. So on June 1st, 1986, Canada took the field against France. What turned out to be a hard-fought game that actually turned out to be quite impressive for the Canadian side. Throughout the game, Canada had multiple chances to score and take the lead, and they never ended up doing it. In fact, they didn't end up getting a goal that whole game. They ended up losing, but only due to a late goal by France. If you ask anyone who watched the game, it was fairly impressive that the young Canadian squad was able to put up such a good fight against an extremely experienced French team. Canada had been restored a bit of hope after watching the Soviet Union absolutely demolish Hungary 6-0. And Hungary was their next matchup. Canada felt pretty good. They knew that they had a chance to actually prove something to the world.
You know, now we go from being massive underdogs to, and unfortunately, I think we started to believe that, okay, we just have to turn up now, and there's going to be some points there for us. And that was the biggest mistake that we could have made.
Unfortunately, that 1-0 loss would turn out to be the peak of their World Cup efforts, as they would lose 2-0 again to Hungary. Going into their last match against the Soviet Union, they knew that they had to at least score a goal. Otherwise, this whole endeavor would pretty much be pointless. Literally. On June 9th, they took the field for what was guaranteed to be their last match of the World Cup. The Soviet Union ended up beating them 2-0 as well, which means that Canada finished off the tournament with a -5 goal differential, 0 points to show for it, 0 wins, and 0 draws. Now if anyone looked at this would seem like a complete failure. Nobody expected them to do well, and they didn't. They put up a decent fight, and they made their country proud. In the end, Argentina ended up winning the World Cup that year, famously due to Maradona's 2 goals against England in the quarterfinal, one of which was the goal of the century, and the other one, well, honestly, I really do find it fascinating to look at the '86 World Cup and to see Canada's name listed. It's really interesting. As of recording this video, the Canadian men's team is ranked 79th in the world. That's 79th out of about 200 teams, which is not terrible, but it's not good. At least, on the men's side. The women's Canadian team is a regular mainstay in the World Cup, most recently making it to the quarterfinal of the 2015 tournament, of which they were the host nation. And in the past 2 Summer Olympics, they've brought home the bronze medal. Since '86, the men's team hasn't really won any major achievements. Aside from winning the CONCACAF Gold Cup in 2000, they haven't been back to the World Cup, and they don't have any major achievements to show for it. To be quite frank, it's entirely possible that in the World Cup, you'll never hear the name Canada ever again. On the other hand, however, my name is Jeremy. I don't know what I'm doing, and I will leave you with this.
So we have a winner for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The member associations of Canada, Mexico and USA have been selected by the FIFA Congress to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Thank you.